Let's talk about war, peace, and women. Why should we talk about war? Why do people fight at first? Usually people fight because they have a deep sense of exclusion. We saw it just in the picture from Northern Ireland. People feel excluded about economic things, about politics, about culture, about religion. And exclusion leads people to have conflict, and some of them turn violent. But why does it concern us, sitting here comfortably? Because the world today is intertwined, and a conflict somewhere here maybe has resulted in a terrorist act somewhere else, or a stream of refugees, as we know, or an economic crisis. So we cannot ignore conflicts and wars anymore that are far away. They have been far away. They're here, right now. So let's talk about peace, because then peace concerns us all. Let's look at that picture up there. These are very happy peace moments. This was the moment when peace agreements were signed after heavy wars, like the war, for example, here up in Colombia, 50 years of war, the people with the white shirts here, Kenya, Sudan, Israel, Palestine. All these were really long-term conflicts, and people came together shaking hands. What's wrong with these pictures? Of course, you see it. There's only one picture, that's this one, where you see women. That's 4 years ago. That was the peace agreement in the Philippines. Actually, Miriam, who stands here and shakes hands, was the first woman ever signing a peace agreement, only 4 years ago. How come that women are excluded of these historical moments of change, when really the world for this country and the neighboring countries and the whole world stands still and thinks, what's the future? The future in this country, is it war or peace? And women are simply excluded. So why is it like that? I think there are many barriers to women inclusion, but I think, should we think about changing the whole game and thinking like, forget about the men with the guns, let's put all the women at the table and then we're going to have peace. That would be really lovely, wouldn't it? Probably it's a bit too simple, because the world is more complex than that, than just changing the players would also change the game. Because maybe the game is the problem. I've done research a couple of years ago with my colleagues on women in peace negotiations. And actually we found, I would say unfortunately, no direct correlation between more women in peace negotiations and more peaceful outcomes. So that was at first, of course, a bit frustrating. But then what we found, and what made our research pretty famous, is that when women came together and had influence over the process, there was suddenly more peace agreements signed and implemented. What does this mean, influence? Let's look at some examples. Northern Ireland, we just saw it. There were the peace talks going on, and you could only take part in a peace talk if you were a registered political party. So what the women across the divide, so it was the women who managed to unite, the women of the Protestants and the Catholics, they came together, formed a political party, and they were in the talks. But that was not enough. They really influenced the talks. They mediated between the men, they exchanged like little cards and said like, this is the solution, you should try this, you should do that. They were really instrumental in bringing about the Good Friday Agreement, exactly 20 years ago. But not enough. That agreement was put to a referendum, and the referendum could have, again, failed the entire process, because if there would have been a no vote, that would have been the end of the peace process. So what the women did, they mobilized across the country a massive civil society campaign in favor of that referendum, and they won, and they're still engaged today. Let's go to Liberia. It's extraordinary what the women did there. The women were starting with sit-ins, and they united also across Christian and Muslim women in the country, came together and said, enough is enough, we want this war to end. And they were really courageous. They were sitting on the road, imagine all these armed vehicles passing all the day, and they were just confronting them. And they said, you have to stop this. The future of our children, you have to stop this. But of course, it took the men quite a while. What they did then is they did a sex strike. They said there's going to be no sex in this country before you stop fighting. The sex workers joined in. So you can imagine that was quite powerful. They then talked even to the president. They managed to get the men around the table, but they were not doing anything. because they were concerned about themselves and their careers after the war. What they did is they traveled to the neighboring country where actually the peace talks happened, and they blocked the room of the negotiations and said, you guys are not gonna out here before you gonna sign this peace agreement. And that's exactly what happened. There's a very good movie, it's called Pray the Devil Back to Hell, which documents that, and 2 of the women involved got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. But you see, we also studied cases like in Nepal, where you had 1/3 of the Constituent Assembly that was shaping the future after the peace agreement was full of women. What did they achieve? Practically nothing. Why? Because all the decisions that were made by a small group of men outside of that official space. And we saw that very often happening. So what our research, which we called Making Women Count and Stop Counting Women, actually found is that it's not the numbers, it's the quality of the engagement. I've supported many peace processes over the last almost 30 years now. I've worked with mediators, with conflict parties, even with warlords, civil society, government, women movements. What I find very striking, very often, since that study, I'm called in to support women inclusion. So I'm called in and says, like, please help. How can we include women? Or the women ask me, what can we do? We want to be part of that table. And I said, like, can you please explain me first, what do you want to be exactly part of? Is it that peace table? Or what do you want exactly? Do you want more women represented? Or do you want more gender-sensitive outcomes in the post area? Or do you want to influence that you even have a peace table? Because what I found, and that really struck me in recent years, there's hardly any peace table. We talk about women should be included in peace tables, but there is no peace table. Look at Syria. Since 2 years, the conflict parties haven't met. Look at Yemen, look at Afghanistan, look all over the world. Interestingly, this concept of there is this table, and there comes the guys with the guns, and then they negotiate, they shake hands, and then there's peace. It's just not working. Because even if they come, they usually either don't shake hands, or if they shake hands and shake hands and shake hands, but it's never been implemented. What we see up there, South Sudan, these guys holding up. I don't know how many peace agreements they have signed, and they're always restarting. And then everybody thinks, this time. But they don't care what happens to the people on the ground. So what is the problem? The problem is really that I often think we're asking the wrong question. It is not about how many women or what can women do at this peace table that doesn't exist. The question is, what can women and men do for peace? And I take it also from sort of the vision. I think we are really lacking these days a vision. A vision, it's not like end this violence here now, or this terrorist act, or this problem. It's about where do we want to go, and that concerns us all, even here in Switzerland. The vision is creating a just, inclusive, peaceful society. We are certainly much closer to that in Switzerland as compared to Afghanistan, but also some work to be done here. So that means the question should be really turned around into where are we now? Who am I? What can I contribute to make us go to this inclusive, peaceful, just society? And then the peace table is one table where we can do that, but there are many other tables as well. What I also observed is, what is hindering us from doing that? What is hindering us? We heard in one of the talks, you need to have the power and the access. I have often a lot of access. Others have maybe no access, but they have other accesses. But what is hindering us from doing more? And what I found, it's courage. It's really courage. And I would like to start with myself. You know, it took me a lot of courage to come here. And not because I'm nervous to talk, I'm also nervous about that, but it took me a lot of courage because I thought, if I come here and talk about women, and that's video recorded, and then I'm this expert who talks about peace processes, would I be taken serious if I now really on a TEDx talk only about women and not about peace processes? I really thought like, well, it gives me really an uneasy feeling. Then I thought like, why is it giving me an uneasy feeling to talk about women? And I think we heard that before. And my explanation is it has to do with 3 factors in a woman's life. And one is girls' education, the other one is Me Too, And the other one is the constant struggle of women when they want to do things differently, when they want to go against maybe the flow, and there's always all these barriers. And I would like to elaborate that with my own story. So, girls' education. I was raised to be strong. I was told you have to be strong, you have to be strong, you have to make it, you have to succeed, and you have to do all sorts of things at the same time. I'm still suffering from that. I always need to do too many things at the same time. And in particular, because I was born from an African father and a European mother, and my grandparents, my European grandparents, before I was born, were greatly afraid that I could turn out really black. Yeah, I mean, that would have been a real shame for the family. So they were kind of seeing it as kind of luck, how I look like. So, but that feeling of you have to overcome this birth problem of being kind of black in being super strong. Okay, so what happened? When I was a doctoral student, I was already a mother at the time, and I was sexually abused by the then emeritus director of the institution. I did my PhD. And as you can imagine, it was a quite horrible experience. And what I did, because I was socialized strong, I reported the case. I was told, you can report this case, but you better not. If you report this case, this will be the end of your career that has not even started. And I wanted to be part of the game, so I didn't report. And I really felt bad about it. 10, 15 years later, I was already a recognized expert in my field. I have really tried to be different and to work in research, to work in practice, to combine all these things against the usual career path. But what was I think one of my most humiliating experiences was when my then teenage son had trouble and I felt like I have to dedicate much more time. And I went to my then deputy director of the institution I was working for and said, I need a leave of absence of 1.5 years unpaid. And she said, for what? Because I need to support my child. And she said, women that put motherhood over career have no space here. And I couldn't hold my tears. I ran to the toilet. I cried. I came out of that toilet and said, enough is enough. Enough is enough. I left the institution and I thought, I can do that. I can take care of my child. I can be an expert and work in the field. I can do all these things. But sometimes you do one thing more than the other. And has it been bad to my career? Absolutely not. Otherwise, I wouldn't stand here, I guess. So what can we learn from this? I think from this we can learn a number of things. For me, it means like we all can do something to change the world we live in, because this peace table is everywhere. Of course, some of us will maybe work on this big peace table, others will work on this other peace tables. But you have to look in your neighborhood, in your family, in your surrounding, in your city, what you can do for peace. And it's not only women. We can make women count, yes. But we need the men in too. So it's about making human counts and not the egos. So I think that's what we all can do for peace. And that's why I think I started with, why are there no women at the peace table? And I'm ending with, maybe there is no peace table and women have just no time to spend on a peace table that doesn't exist. And they can do many more things. Like, for example, the women in Cyprus. They have already, since 20 years, crossed the lines. And at the moment, they are waiting for the guys to do something. I think they can just sit down, write their own peace agreement, and come up with a peace conference on their own. As the women in Yemen, they are doing all sorts of things. They are talking to different parties, and they do all sorts of things. The women in Libya, they are now preparing for the national dialogue before the UN even starts talking about it. So you can do a lot of things if you look ahead. What is it what you can do? Because nobody will do the job for you. So if we don't do it, nobody else will do it. And that's why I have a task for you. Yeah, don't think that you're just going home and doing nothing. So what I would like you to do is, when you go to bed tonight, sleep well. When you wake up in the morning, You ask yourself, what is it that I can do for peace? If you're a woman, if you're a man, what you can do for peace in your relationship, as a father or a mother, in your neighborhood, in local politics. There's a lot you can do here for peace. Or internationally, whatever you think it is. If you wake up and have a good idea, you say, I'm good. I mean, you have to do it the next day again, of course. If you have no idea whatsoever, you just keep on trying, and I count on you. Thank you very much.